Here I am, some dude in my 30s with a backwards hat on talking about longevity. I don't blame you if you just want to click off this video. But I have been doing this for quite a long time, and I spend my entire life just reading scientific literature and working in the lab even with some researchers. So I think I have a decent knack for it. For the longest time, we have just correlated calorie restriction with longevity. You eat less, your life expectancy increases. That seems to be like the strongest correlation. But then when you start looking at the other data, you realize, well, there's a lot of other things that add up. Where does calorie restriction really fall into play? Well, there is a relatively newer study, and it's kind of floated around social media a little bit. And it talks about something called calorie dilution, which I have talked about on this channel in other contexts before. But when people are talking about it on social media, they're saying, hey, look, calorie restriction doesn't work. Well, they're talking about calorie dilution. Okay. What we have to understand in the world of longevity is that calorie restriction is just one of these things where, we say you burn hot, you die young. If you burn a little bit cooler, maybe you can live a little bit longer. And it's all hypothetical, it's all theory, and some of it's rooted in science, but there's a lot of other pieces we need to understand. What is calorie restriction versus dilution? Calorie restriction is where you say, hey, you are restricting your calories on a certain day or to a certain amount in a given day, in a given week, in a given time period, restricting the calories. Whereas calorie dilution is letting people just eat ad libitum, eat as much as you want, but eat nutrient-dense foods and eat foods that are diluted in calories. And whether or not you end up in a caloric restricted period via that way or not, it's probably better for you because you get more nutrition, you get more just dilution of calories. Let me put this in a different way. If I were to eat a bowl of cereal in 10 seconds, like just wolf it down, that would be a pretty serious caloric surplus, right? How do you compare that to a caloric surplus over the course of a day, right? Am I in a caloric surplus in this very nanosecond? Am I in a caloric deficit in this very nanosecond? So deficit is like an arbitrary, very subjective term because if I say I live in a deficit, I try to be in a caloric deficit most of the time, there's obviously going to be periods of time when I'm not in a deficit because I'm eating, and I'm definitely not in a deficit at that period of time. So this paper was published in Nature Metabolism, and it found that calorie dilution did not work when it came down to life expectancy, but calorie restriction did. This is the paper that has been misconstrued on social media. You see people blowing it around, just saying, told you calorie restriction doesn't work for longevity. Well, calorie dilution didn't have as much of an impact on longevity as calorie restriction. That's where people are getting confused. There's a huge difference between calorie dilution and calorie restriction. Calorie dilution can ultimately lead to caloric restriction, but not always. And I've said this before, I'll say it again in a different context. If I put you in a room and let you eat as many pizzas and cakes and pies and Twinkies as you wanted to, and I put you in a room with as many steaks and kale salads and mushrooms and fruit and whole foods, and you can eat as much as you want, who's going to eat more calories? Probably the pizza group, right? But what if I put you in that same room with the pizzas and the Twinkies and the pies, and I said, hey, here's all this food, but you gotta stop at 3,000 calories, like a hard line. But then I also put you in the room with unlimited amounts of wholesome food. You're probably gonna eat more of the unlimited wholesome food, but arguably you might even lose more weight. Now, before I get into the details and what you should do, because I'm not a longevity expert, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just not, okay? I'm in my 30s. I can't tell you, maybe when I'm 90, I can preach from the rooftops or the peanut gallery, but right now I'm in my 30s. I can only look at the literature. But I will say that nutrient-rich foods seem to be very important because eating sufficient calories is very, very important. So I'm gonna get down to a playbook in just a second. I'll also put a link down below for 30% off your entire first grocery order with Thrive Market. Cool news, I created a nut butter, a dessert nut butter with them. I have one that's macadamia nut butter. I have one that's cinnamon Brazil nut butter. Okay, and then I have one that is also chocolate hazelnut. A lot like Nutella, except they're all sweetened with allulose, so they're super low carb, and you still get the polyunsaturated and the monounsaturated fats, especially in the macadamia nut one. But it also just helps us out, right? I created this product, spent 2 years formulating it with Thrive. So if you give it a shot, I'd really appreciate it. So you try that link down below, you'll save 30% off your whole grocery order. Not to mention, they have things like cottage cheese and vegetables. It's a full grocery store now. Legitimately, even fresh, and it's shipped to your doorstep in a day or two. So that link down below, 30% off plus a free $60 gift. This Nature metabolism study though, it looked at fasting particularly, which was interesting. And this isn't a fasting video, but it basically found that calorie dilution and even calorie restriction wasn't really working unless there was like a defined sort of prolonged fast. And what we gather from that is that the calorie restriction ongoing could even be problematic because at a certain point, calorie restriction is going to impede recovery, repair, mTOR, muscle preservation, right? We don't want to skimp on calories. I have always been a proponent, whether it's performance, just day-to-day life, and now even longevity, of G-Flux, energy flux. It is much better to eat more and move more than it is to skimp, starve yourself, and move less. And whether you feel like you're moving less or not, when you eat less, you do move less. Non-exercise activity thermogenesis. There's literature that suggests that when you restrict your calories, you move less, you fidget less. And we don't even realize until you look at the literature how powerful non-exercise activity thermogenesis is for overall just cellular function, not to mention our waistline and our metabolism. Now, the reason that fasting comes into play with this, hear me out, is because in these particular studies, they say, hey, they're eating a decent amount of calories, but then they have an aggressive drop with their fasting periods where they are going through a period of caloric restriction in a very aggressive way, because this whole calorie restriction thing, it is a dimmer switch. And you can turn that dimmer switch down a little bit by turning your calories down and get a little effect and be semi-miserable all the time. Or you can say, screw it, I'm gonna turn it down all the way for a day or two and just get all this effect in a short amount of time. And arguably, although that's a very colloquial way of putting it, it kind of works like that to a certain degree. Because AMPK phosphorylation does work like a dimmer switch. And AMPK phosphorylation is one of the biggest things we look at as far as the calorie restriction equation for longevity. The longevity equation that everybody seems to miss is the simple act of recovery. I don't want to sit in a bed starving but living forever. I want to eat, I want to recover, I want to repair, I want to thrive, and I want to move. And I want to eat a lot of good nutritious food. Because when you eat things like good quality meat, good quality vegetables, good quality fruit, you're satisfying every aspect that your body is asking for and what your brain is asking for and what minerals you need. That we know just at the basic level that once these needs are met, we're not craving things the way that we normally would if you're eating a Twinkie or a Snickers bar and hyperpalatable stuff that's making you want to eat more. Because then, yeah, you have to put the restrictions on. So theoretically, is the trick to longevity just eating wholesome food and listening to your body? When you look at the research with calorie dilution and then periodic times of just restricting calories via fasting, it seems pretty darn basic. Movement, food, recovery, restriction, nutrients, that's about it. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you tomorrow.